Let's see here. All right. Well, the official start time is in 15 minutes from now at 10 till 7, but we'll go ahead and get started. Happy Father's Day to the dads. Let's start with a prayer together. Lord, we're so grateful for how you've made us, how you've created us, this wonderful world that you've given us. Lord, here we are on the longest day of sunshine in the entire year. And Lord, it reflects the light of your love that you've shown on your creation, that without it, there's darkness. And Lord, without you, there's darkness for us and for the whole world. Thank you that Jesus, who is the light of the world, came to show us your way more perfectly. I pray, Lord, that we in turn would reflect as mirrors that light to those who are around us, especially those who are closest to us, and especially those who are most vulnerable and trusting of us. Guide us in this sacred trust that you've given us, and help us, Lord, to be as diligent in our attention to our prayers and to your word and to you as we are to our entertainment screens. It's in Jesus we pray. Amen. Well, folks, people ask, what do you do for a living? I would say my job is to talk about awkward but important things. I do that for a living. It doesn't mean that it's easy for me, but I do. And it's the same way with my family, my children. It's the same way with my church family. It's the same way with sinners who are on the borderline, standing on the other side of God's kingdom, and say, what must I do to be saved? I got to give them controversial and countercultural truth, because I'm not there to make friends and influence people to the cult of my own personality, but to Jesus Christ. And he is very different from me. So what we're talking about is how to talk with your children and grandchildren confidently and appropriately about sex. And you're also a Christian auntie or uncle for a lot of people. You're one of the elders within the church. And at the moment, we don't have the parents here, so we even need you to be ambassadors to tell the parents how to do this. Now, in the past, amateur youth ministers came in and said, you know, the kids are being bombarded with sexual messages, and so what we need to do is we need to have a teen class on sex. And I said, well, okay, but what we really need to do is we need to get the parents and the grandparents and the elders in the church and coach them up on how they can be the ones who convey that. Because we're not close enough to them. That's water off a duck's back. You're the person that they respect. You're the person that has the influence, even if you slough that off, you know, and say, you know. They really are looking to you, and they really do care about what you're saying much more than you could possibly imagine, even a kid who you gauge to be a complete stranger in the church. So what the best I can do is what I've done in the past, and my memory is good enough to remember that I've promoted this Concordia Learning About Sex series in the past. But the books look different now because they've gone through several permutations and updates and stuff like that. But it's a series of books that help you to have these conversations with your kids, your grandkids, or to help people who are asking you how to broach this subject. It starts with why boys and girls are different for boys, that's age 3 to 5, and where do babies come from for girls, ages 6 to 8. And those are developmental stages, so that's intentional. And this series of books is graded in vocabulary and information needed for the children at each of their ages. So I want to start passing these around. And let me get these together here. Pardon my back here. Okay, this is the one that starts off for girls, ages 6 to 8. This is how you are changing, girls age 9 to 11. And you give these to them. These you read to the children on your lap. You're sitting on the couch and reading to them. And this is something that you give, and by that age they can read, and it's to their age group. Girls ages 12 to 14, this is their next book. And young women ages 14 and up, okay? And then for the boys, why boys and girls are different, ages 3 to 5. This is for boys ages 9 to 11. And my kids were basically readers. Eli can read anything now, and it's, just has the writing and text and vocabulary at their level. And then boys ages 12 to 14, Sex and the New You. Okay, how you were changing, Sex and the New You. And then ages 14 and up, Love, Sex, and God. And I would imagine that a lot of this information gets passed on maybe when there's a crisis in a family. And by then it may be 3 or 4 years too late. And so what Becky and I tried to do is we tried to be proactive, because the culture is certainly proactive. And it's almost impossible to avoid even a preschooler being exposed to sexual material because it's so pervasive in our culture. And you've got the position of greatest influence. And with our children and our grandchildren, we've started it at a very early age. I want to let you know how far things have gone. You know who this is, right? Anybody? Okay. Mr. Rogers. And I want to play something. He has all kinds of songs, and I downloaded them all. And I go to pick up the kids to take them to their school a couple of days a week. And school's out for them now, but we listen to Mr. Rogers because he has such emotionally healthy songs about dealing with feelings and everything, and he touches on every subject. And he wrote a song about children and their bodies, and he celebrates them. But today, and I'm just stating a fact, he would be canceled, and this would be counted as hate speech. So Mr. Rogers is one of the key haters. He should be canceled. But listen to him here.
Some are fancy on the outside.
Can you hear it?
Some are fancy on the inside. Everybody's fancy.
2 minutes long.
Everybody's fine. Your body's fancy, and so is mine. Boys are boys from the beginning. When you're born a boy baby, you grow up to be a bigger boy and then a man. Girls are girls right from the start. When you're born a girl baby, you grow up to be a bigger girl and then a woman. Everybody's fancy, everybody's fine. Your body's fancy, and so is mine. Girls grow up to be the mommies. Boys grow up to be the daddies. Everybody's fancy, Everybody's fine. Your body's fancy, and so is mine. I think you're a special person, and I like your ins and outsides. Everybody's fancy, everybody's fine. Your body's fancy, and so is mine. I think you're a special person, and I like your ins and outsides. Everybody's fancy, everybody's fine. Your body's fancy, and so is mine. No.
Well known fact, the jazz pianist is like an award Grammy-winning jazz piano player who played for Mr. Rogers. He's really incredible. But at any rate, all that to say, we were starting from a very early age with our kids in conveying this stuff. You say, well, Mark, do you feel awkward talking about this stuff? Well, sure. But have you ever been uncomfortable for your family? We decided to be proactive in putting this information out. And what that does is it forearms them, age appropriately, for what they're already going to be bombarded with in the world. For a few years at the local community college, I taught child development classes, and this is a 2003 textbook, and I taught from this. Not religious at all. It's sociology, psychology, child development, and I consumed this book. I mean, I completely covered all ages and stages of child development, and I taught college students this. And a lot of people in these fields are running for cover now. I know if my livelihood was threatened, I might compromise what the data says. But this was before all that happened, and basically what the scriptures describe as optimal is what the research, longitudinal, long-term studies with statistically accurate numbers over long periods of time, around the world and around cultures, it doesn't matter. The same things that make for a healthy family are true right across, and it fits hand in glove with what the scriptures have been telling us all along. So I say, do not believe some of the crazy you hear. You sort of cock your head and say, what is that? Well, don't believe it. If you have the wherewithal to dig around in scientific journals and not listen to prognosticators, you will find, just as you do in the realm of science, that the Bible has been telling us this all along. So you don't have to be a genius, you don't have to be a professor, you don't have to be anything. You just need to listen to the Word of God. Our sexuality is not separate from who God made us. A couple of scriptures. Male and female, He created them, and God saw everything that He had made, and it was very good. And then just the sense of awe and wonder. 1 John 3:1. See what kind of love, that's my misspelling. What kind of love the Father has given to us that we should be called children of God. This is what Satan would have us believe. It's just you. Your actions do not affect anybody. Nobody's going to tell me what to do. It's my life, my body. But what the scriptures say is you are in a relationship with God and others. God created you, designed you a certain way, and you're in relation to others. And your sexuality, as created, has the elements of joy and wonder and respect, and if you want to say boundaries, would go under here, and godly love. I can't even use the word love because that means some love, Everything is just, it's almost like a beautiful plant and thorns have grown up. So you can't even use the word love without all the thorny contention. So I say godly love. Yes, godly love, under our sexuality. And the reason I say this is, whatever hang-ups you may have, I don't care. You've got to go with this and teach this to your children and let this be reflected in your attitude. And if you're married, you probably need to bring this into your marriage if something's out of line and you don't understand your sexuality has a sense of joy, wonder, respect, and godly love. This is what makes it work. And I know that, Jesus is kind of wearing a toga, right? Probably got it at the Goodwill. Boring. The devil gets to wear the bright colors. Okay? He's flashy. And he's got a big megaphone. Jesus is humbly dressed, and he's the one who's the real deal. He's the truly, truly, I say to you. And the world is saying there's a sexual circus going on, and you are missing out. And people go down that path, and they don't find the fulfillment that they promised. The devil doesn't care whether, that's bait, that's a hook. Sex with anything and everything that moves, age differences, doesn't matter. Genders, doesn't matter. Porn, have at it. Sex, just be safe. Party on. The Bible's telling us something else. But your kids are getting none of this, and they're getting all of that because it's just out there. And that's the kind of environment that we're both basically living in. And this was in the New Testament times, the city of Corinth and all of that. But back to being proactive with your kids. Where are the books? Have they made their way around? Has everybody seen them? Yeah, you don't have to pass them on. I'm not hurrying it up, but I want to make sure that these make their way through. Not only do we use these books with our kids, but we took them on a retreat. What I mean is, Catherine on the verge of her teenagerhood, Becky took her out to the shore, and, they had like a mom and daughter time. And I did the same with my boys, separately, and I used James Dobson's Preparing for Adolescence. And this is a book, to kids. And we just would sit and we'd read a chapter, and then we'd go get a kite and fly a kite on the beach. And then we'd read another chapter and so on. And I would ask if they had questions. Sometimes they did, sometimes they didn't. But it helped me to broach these awkward subjects. And these books do as well. And the thing is, there's this old joke, that, Johnny comes and said, "Mom, where did I come from?" And she goes in this elaborate explanation of the reproduction. And he goes, "No, where was I born? What town? Philly. Henry was born in, Pittsburgh. I was born in Philly." So sometimes we're answering the wrong question. And I want you to think of a child as a cup, They have a capacity, and whatever they sort of don't understand kind of flows out of the cup. They only need to know so much at a certain age. And then they'll go, "Oh, okay," and then they'll go play. "I'm Superman," and they're on to the next thing. But they also need repetition. Like they may ask you a question, "Why is Miss Louisa's tummy, fat? Is she going to have a baby?" "Yeah, but, the baby's not in her tummy. It's a special place God made called a uterus, and that's where the baby's born." "Oh, okay." And then 3 weeks later, out of nowhere, your kid will ask the same thing. It's because kids, they need repetition. So you're not given too much information. You're not given too little. You're gauging it to their age and stage of development. And you're being proactive about it. And that's the thing. I think maybe Christians may be more susceptible to this flaw than others, that we want to preserve our children's innocence as long as possible. And so our children of Christian parents can end up kind of naive, and I don't mind that. I like people and children who are able to blush The prophet said it's a sign of the collapse of a civilization when people have forgotten how to blush. That's a term of the prophets. And so when I see somebody who can have that capacity to be embarrassed, I think that's sweet. I think it's wonderful. But the world does not feel that way about your children. And your child may not have a phone, but they have a friend who has a phone, or they have a friend of a friend who has a phone. And that means they're open to the internet. So you don't have really the option, if you say you love your children or your grandchildren, or you're going to be a Christian auntie or uncle to a little waif who's wandering around the church and mom and daddy are too into their own thing or problems, and you can gently guide them a little bit. If you love them, you're going to be proactive. If you love them, you're going to have awkward conversations. And it's not a speech that you practice over and over again. It's like, oh, I got to get this right, and flashcards, and you're just sweat's pouring. How am I going to do this? Where are the books here? Where do they go? Oh, yeah. What you're doing is you're using these books that are put together by Christian counselors, psychologists, theologians, and child development people, and it's all graded, you know. So you're sitting down and you're reading this to your kid, along with the Very Hungry Caterpillar and other things, you know. Here's a kid, you know, and it's saying everyone's different, and boys and girls are different, and we have different likes and dislikes, and it goes on, and it just explains the context, and here's fathers, and here's mothers, and, you know, here's babies, and we're in families, and we're in church families, and all of this, and it gives this larger context for who they are in all of this, and then how they're made. And this hasn't awakened in them yet. You know, there's a line in the Song of Solomon that says, do not awaken desire until it so pleases. That it's okay for this to stay dormant in the kids, but they need some kind of framework to understand it, okay? Yeah, Tony?
Just two quick things. One example of what you're saying is when the kid asks you a question, you know, you got to realize where it's coming from or how much info they need or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Joshua goes to a Christian school, so I picked him up one day, and he was coming in the house, and he said, God, where's Jesus? And I said, okay, to myself, in 2 seconds, like, okay, I don't want to give him too much information, but I want to give him a real answer, you know? So I said, well, Jesus is God, so he can be in many places at one time. He's in your heart, and he's in heaven. And I just left it there thinking, oh, he did a good job. And he goes, no, the little one. And we have little plastic Jesuses around that he was looking for the toy.
I'm sorry. I threw those in the trash. I said, yeah, go ahead.
I know, but it was just funny. I thought it reminded me of what you were saying. And also, just these kids, when they're young, like, Joshua was like 3, and we were at a park, and there was this little girl, just the kind of classic little girl, blonde, dress, running around, and he couldn't take his eyes off her.
Yeah.
I mean, he was chasing her around, and it's just like that early that there's just something there. And
Yeah.
of course it wasn't sexual, but he was just attracted to her.
Yeah.
You know, wanted to play with her, sit with her, chase her, just unbelievable.
Yeah, and you know, there's an innocence in the garden in Adam and Eve, and it's just, there's a sense that Adam is just in wondrous awe of this person who's like him but who's different. You know, and it's just a glorious thing. We went to the shore on Monday because the Christian school gets out a week earlier, and so they said, what are we going to do? Okay, so we took them to Avalon Beach, and we had our cabana, you know, this neat thing. You pop up with one pole, and it's cool, you know, you're in the shade. And so the day's grinding on, okay, man, time to go home. So we take down the thing, and we're shaking the sand out of everything. And behind our cabana was a young woman who was sunning herself. She's in this bikini, you know, and she's just laying back there, you know, sunning herself. And we hadn't noticed her. I mean, we're looking at the beach and everything. I noticed her. Well, never mind. But anyway, you know, they're behind us, and you know, and so we pack everything up and put it in the beach cart, you know, with the big fat wheels, and we're pulling it to the entrance there of the beach, you know, dragging this thing. Where's Emmy? We look back, and she's standing there looking at this girl like she would look at a fish or a seashell or something like. She'd never seen, like a girl laid out like that. Emmy, stop that. Come on. Come on. And I had to go get her, And so she's changing in the changing room over by the entrance where the parking lot is. And she comes out and, sitting there with her, and then the boys go in and they're changing out of their swimsuit and into their other clothes. And I was saying, so Emmy, you were back there and there's that girl, and I said, what were you doing? And she said, like that. She didn't say anything. I said, well, do you realize that she was once a little girl like you? She was as tall as you were, and she had a ponytail, and she was running around on the beach hollering, and she matured. She grew up. And I said, that will be you one day. So you see the wheels turning in her mind. That'll be me? Wow. And I said, did you know that your Meemaw, she was standing over there washing out the buckets. You understand that Meemaw was once your age? She was a little girl running around, playing with dolls and toys and climbing trees. It's like you are the interpreter of reality for your children. And they really need some interpretation in this area because sexuality and addictions and what passes for entertainment, what's funny and what's not, it's gotten all twisted up. You say, look at all these horror movies. Why would people go to that? Well, there's something in us that we don't like to acknowledge, that we like to see other people tortured and in fear. And I'm not going to feed that in me. But to make $1, they're going to show you anything that will wake up your dark side. So that's why I'm interested in other entertainments and not too much of it. The same thing with sexuality. If it will, sex sells. And it's challenging, and it's always been challenging. I don't want to say that this is worse. It's just more ubiquitous, like you can't escape it by living out on the farm somewhere. We have become like one world through our devices. So it takes a level of foresight, prayer, and being proactive. And all I'm saying is there's tools out there. And as a church, I think we would be within our rights for me to teach a class on sexuality to our high school kids, but it just wouldn't be effective. Best practices, whether it's in public schools, which I believe teach a twisted version that's kind of mostly accurate, but so much bad in it that it's almost not helpful, that you are the person that's going to be the most effective in getting this across, and not just about sexuality, but also about entertainment choices and substance use. So I'm going to be as careful as possible. And one thing I heard a couple say, I thought it was Ken and Ann Bottoms. They'd raised a Christian family. He was an elder here years ago. And he says, remember that whatever you do, your kids are going to do it and then some. So, I might be within my rights, to do this in my Christian freedom, but I'm going to be careful that I'm backspacing a little bit because my children and now my grandchildren are looking at me and they're going to do what I do and take it a step further. So if you're right on the edge, where's that going to put them? If you're pushing the envelope. And I feel that in the grand scheme of things, I'm really not missing anything. That God knows how to give good gifts to his children. And so I think that if you're not proactive, it falls into a realm of forbidding. Don't do that. An area of confusion for some children involves their genitals and organs of elimination. They're all in the same place, reasons little Elijah, and Mommy says to wash up my hands after I go to the bathroom, so they must all be dirty. If your child thinks like little Elijah, explain that we wash our hands after going to the bathroom to get rid of any germs that are in a bowel movement. But that doesn't mean that any part of our body is dirty in a bad way. All the parts do the job that God made them to do. Okay? And so, unfortunately, you should also warn your child about the possibilities of abuse. You might want to work into a discussion of appropriate behavior. Your body belongs to you, including those private parts that your swimming suit covers. You don't show those parts or touch them in public, and other people should not touch your private parts either. No one has a right to do that unless it's a nurse or doctor helping you to be well, or someone who cares for you by helping you to be clean. If anyone does touch your private parts, be sure to tell me. I want to keep you safe. And just, leave it at that. And by and large, they'll say, oh, okay, And they may need, reinforcement or something later, but they'll get that. Our world is bombarded with sexual references and exploitation. Not even a preschooler can escape that completely. But your child's trust still remains in you. You are the real authority to him in almost every matter, including sexuality. Okay? To counter cultural influences, be strong and consistent in communicating the miracle of God's design. The way God made us is just the way he knew it should be for our health and happiness. So, when it comes to your child's sexuality, do they first think, oh, bad, no? Or do they think awe and wonder and respect and the godly love that's the foundation of all of it? So if you put this off in a mistaken desire to protect your child's innocence, I just won't talk about this for as long as possible, which maybe for previous generations, they did, you're always going to be on the defensive. And the ones who get first dibs on your kids, as far as orienting them, is going to be the culture. Bill.
Yeah, really, really great points, Mark. And now that my kids are kind of in their 20s, and when you see things for decades, it all plays out. You don't see it that way when you're 25, when you're 30. But being in the church and high school and college, there's no one evil person that's coming for your kids. But it is Satan's great trapdoor is the sex and the addictions. And having taught the teen class here for decades, and I tell them, more than half of you will fall to the sex and the addictions, and it's just true.
Yeah.
Decade after decade after decade. So I really do like the idea of the books because it's done for you as long as you like it.
Yeah.
Pick the right one. Because boy, the trap is there, and they're coming for your kids. There's not one evil person, like I said. It's this the Satan trap, and as many kids have been swallowed up in it. Because once you're hooked on sex or the drugs, it's hard to ever get you back because that's your new God.
Mm-hmm. Indeed. Well said. Bill has labored for years with our teens. Scott and Chris worked with my boys a long time, a lot of time with Catherine. Old Linda Amato sat Catherine down and had Bible studies with her after she was baptized. So these are people who are not related to me or my family or my kids, but they help guide them in the right way. And it's almost like, for all the hard work and all the heart and soul, and you know that Bill taught them right, it's almost like trying to plug a hole when the water's already in the boat, by the time teenagers happen. That's why we're starting with Mr. Rogers before, when they're 3 years old. They're saying, my body's fancy, my body's good. And here's a boy, and here's a girl baby, and they grow up to be a man and a woman, and mommy loves daddy, and daddy loves mommy, and they've got the big things in place as far as their orientation in the world. My brother's a pediatrician, and he's not necessarily that religious, but just let me tell you, in his secular practice as a pediatrician, he said kids come in and they'll say, well, I think I might, be a boy, or I think I might be a girl, or something like that. And the parents kind of say, well, this is a whole new thing, and I've got to go down this path, and down this rabbit hole. And they're forgetting that years ago, their kids said that they were Spider-Man. And my little brother, when he was a boy, used to think that if he jumped off of dangerous bike ramp and he had a cape on, that he would be safe, you know, and he got into several crashes. And so what my brother, the pediatrician, says is tell the parents, no, you're not. Cut that out, you know. Or, you know, I'm a cat now. He said, well, yeah, good. You know, Halloween, we're having fun with that. You know, you're going to play house for a while, but now here's your clothes. Go play something else. And that we just get all up in our heads about all this stuff. And you got to understand, kids, they try on roles. It's like if you had a rack of 20 Halloween costumes, the kids are just thrilled and they're trying on all these Halloween costumes. Look, I'm this, you know, I'm a Power Ranger, you know, because they feel powerless, you know. But that's something of childhood, and if you go down that rabbit hole with them and and you're not oriented yourself, they catch on and they kind of say, yeah, that's right, I am feeling this way. Well, are you upset? Well, maybe, you know. Here's an ice cream cone. Ooh, ice cream, you know. And you understand how this can kind of roll. And he says that he gets a lot of, it's just his observation, he gets a lot of neurotic parents who have no reference points and their kids leading them around by the nose. When a generation before, for all that they got wrong, would say, that's stupid, cut that out. And they could go, oh, okay. Did you give them a complex? No. Don't hit your hand with a hammer. Don't stick your fork in the, you know. All right. So maybe I'm oversimplifying, but we overthink this. Hit these big things. Be proactive with your kids. And on the verge of teenagerhood, rather than you playing catch up with the culture, you be proactive so that they are somewhat armored against that. Yeah, I see that odd thing over there, but mom and dad, I know how things work and I know how things are in the world. And behind mom and dad are grandmom and granddad, and behind grandmom and granddad there's God and Jesus, and you know, there's this whole, you know. And it's funny that boundaries make children safe and secure, and when there are no boundaries, they really get upset. So what is it? Is it the love of a mom? Oh, come here, oh, you know. Or is it the dad, you know, you fell off the swing, well, tough, get up there and try it again. No, I don't want to. You can do it. Okay, and they start swinging and the tears dry and, hey, I can do it, you know. Which of those is the way of parenting? Yes. Both. Without both, it's the sound of one hand clapping. Male and female, the father's way, the mother's way, it's built into our DNA. And biologists, if you take them aside very quietly and promise not to tell anyone, they'll tell you that this is true on a cellular level. They can't risk saying that now, but they'll say on a cellular level this is true. Child development people, child psychologists, people who work with kids, people like Chris Schoner, who works with kids in schools, Scott, who works with family court. He has to teach classes on basic parenting, you know. And it's basically this stuff, maybe disguised or something like that, but it's the same principles God has always had and designed. So maybe I'm weird, but my dad was one who had books like this. In the 70s, everything was hip, you know, and so they had these kind of books too. And he had a secular version of the books, but it wasn't some of the weirdness that's come out now. But it was basically the same thing, but without the God references. And he gave us these books, and he would talk with us and stuff. And I said, you know, I found out, like, Dad, why? You know, and he said, well, because my parents didn't do that for me. Isn't there a world of wisdom in that? Are you going to pass on the crazy? Or are you going to have, not the conversation, you know, did you have the talk with your kids? No. It's not the talk, it's the talks. And they start out with Mr. Rogers, and then they build on that just little by little, you know. Yeah, we talked about that, you know, and we started seeing little changes in Johnny or Jane, you know, and we took them out on, we had a special weekend, and we went out to eat, and we walked on the beach, and we read this book, and, you know, I just kind of learned about what this is. And the thing is, they'll see a correspondence between what they have observed and what's said in the books, and it'll click like a key in a lock, you know, like tumblers in a lock. I'll go, oh, yeah, you know. And it happens before it's ever visible. And, you know, a lot of times in ministry, and anybody who's in church leadership over the years here at Collingswood would tell you, people come to us in a panic. You know, my kid's done this or done that. I said, do you have a time machine? You know, we needed you about 15 years ago to go back and kind of, but none of that's done, and it gets in a crisis, you know, kind of like people needing financial, you know, help. While I'm in this crisis, it's year after year of crisis. I'm not trying to shame anyone. I'm just saying that we're saved when we're baptized, but there is a holiness, there's a process of sanctification. We're not only looking out for me, that's a very American form of Christianity. You know, how does this supercharge my life and make me a more effective, you know. This is biblical. God, others. And I'm in a context here of my family, but also God's family. And so that means there's a shared responsibility. We need to teach. This is what I'm going to do in my sermon today. I was talking about what a father's job is. Love, protect, teach, and connect. Connect means you don't just give them the words, but you let them process it. You talk to them about this. Love isn't something that's passive, it's active. Jesus didn't sit on a couch and cry over us. He came to this world, and he actively sought us out and loved us. Protect. We talk to parents about stranger danger and kids. The vast majority of abusers of children are known to the child. Are you aware of this? I'm hearing some yeses, yes. It's an uncle, an aunt, you know, and women are abusing, not as much, but more frequently than you would think in our day, because things have just, all of this is just completely gone now. All the boundaries that used to be there. And the dynamic that most often happens is a mother is single and she's desperate, and she needs financial help, and she has a boyfriend who moves in with her and starts molesting her children over and over and over again. And this is the I try not to use language, but this is the hell of it. This is the hell of it. That sometimes the mother's actually complicit. In that, she'll turn a blind eye because it's paying the bill and she doesn't want to be evicted. This goes on. The devil offers, you know, he'll promise you the world, and he delivers misery. Jesus says the path is narrow that leads to life. But he's not leading us to austerity and monastic life. He's leading us to a glorious life for us and those around us. And we've got to have a sense of protecting this church family. Okay, honey? Sweetheart. Miss. Miss. Shh, 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 shh. You're talking loud. I don't know if she hears or not. Okay, she can't hear. Okay. And then we're to teach, yes. But we're also to connect. Okay, so that's where you know your children individually. So some of your kids are extroverted, some are introverted. You know maybe how your children learn, and so you're adjusting it to them. Love, protect, teach, connect. All right, so don't forget, folks, the Concordia Learning About Sex series. I'll leave these books up here. And there is another couple of books. You know, it's not a religious book, but Berenstain Bears Learn About Strangers. This one's worn out, you know. We've read this to our kids. Berenstain Bears Learn About Lying. Here's one about porn proofing, you know, good pictures, bad pictures. And it's made for children, you know, for young people. And you can read this, you know, and it talks about staying away from porn, okay? Give them strategies and preparing them for what's out there. Because, I don't know, they're going to see it. You got to prepare them for it. So there's a world of good stuff. You say, Mark, what weird Christian bookstore did you find this stuff in? Amazon. This is there, that is there. The Concordia series. Amazon's a company. They want to make money. So they're gonna sell you anything. They'll even sell you books that say the opposite to your children. They will. But the Concordia Learning About Sex series, and I'll leave these books up here. So let's end with prayer. Lord, we're so thankful for fathers, for mothers, for your forever family, the church. And we just pray that you'd help us to be proactive in telling our children and holding among our fellowship the foundational goodness and godly love in our sexuality and how you created us this way. And you declared it good. And Lord, just as fire can warm our house and cook our food and sterilize things so we don't get germs and infections, Lord, out of bounds, fire will burn our house down and kill us. So our sexuality, within its bounds, warms our home, keeps us careful, and keeps us loving each other in the right way, and bears wonderful children for generations to come. But Lord, help us to keep it within your bounds, and help us to teach all of our kids, not just ours, those values. In Jesus we pray, amen. God bless you all.
Thanks, Mark.